Legend says that Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back and every day wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And Tara Reade came out to say the man they tried to label the messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer, and knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US printed walking papers, and knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character, that his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation. So if you really think there's something to be gained out of sharing your pain with the world, you are sorely mistaken. The Biden team just dragged their feet addressing Tara's allegations. Until they had a decent list of smears, then they aired them out on every station. And it turns out no one wants to hear the truth of who they praised as being worthy of such bloated liberal celebration. That no one wants to really know the person they've so valiantly defended, even when it meant they had to gloat and shit all over someone braver than they'd be if given the occasion. Now cue the faceless comment squad invasion. Cue those fuckers crawling out the woodwork to come analyze the way you wore your hair and what you wear. Like your appearance waives your rights, or that somehow you're the reason for your situation. Somehow they've decided you should bear responsibility for what such monstrous men insist on doing. Somehow they're deluded by the empty, hypocritical, and useless fucking platitudes that bastard keeps on spewing. And I think it's very telling that the best of their excuses when they try to come and justify our president's abuses is a hearty butt Trump. In which case I'll remind you that you never saw the news attempt to sell us Donald Trump like he was morally upstanding or a decent human. But when Joe says something bigoted or ogles someone's little kid, CNN says, isn't this refreshing? Biden's like a mix of JFK and FDR with all the finer parts of Harry Truman. Christ, I know that they don't think that we're the brightest, but at least pretend we got a couple lumens. Ask yourself if you have ever questioned what they fed you, or do you just shut your eyes and then consume it? And now ask yourself if you ate every one of Biden's lies under guise of harm reduction and the promise of a slight improvement. And now imagine long ago that Biden chose to show you who he really was by traumatizing you for his amusement. Now imagine that you watched him touch a Bible with those filthy hands, and then assume the power of the highest seat in all the land, of knowing your attacker wields a global coalition born of three-letter agencies who'll make a life's mission out of trying to discredit you through lies, damn lies, and collusion. Big tech is never gonna separate from our surveillance state. Fuck's sakes, they're just a breath away from total fusion. So there will come a time where even if you see the light, your voice will never reach the sky through all the bots and all the noise pollution. So trust us when we tell you that the masking of abuses is perhaps this country's oldest institution. And I know nothing nobler than facing it in honor of the truth when you know that the people holding power have been neutralizing truth since there was wet ink on the Constitution. So know that Tara's truth is something crucial to the movement. And if you see yourself a partner to the revolution, help this country see through all the baseless propaganda through the crux of Joe's illusions. And recognize that Tara Reade gave everything she had so she could tell us what the truth is. Recognize the decent thing to do when someone bears their soul and shows their bruises is not to ask for context or offer up your own solutions. Your job is just to listen with an honest mind and put yourself on Tara's side a moment so you understand the path she chooses. That there is no instant fame worth the dragging of your name. And if that's what you think, you've a lot to learn about the kind of facts the mob can handle and the kind that it refuses. You've a lot to learn about the news and all its many uses. Guess you've yet to learn the truth the news will serve as fruit from which they've squeezed out all the juices. And we all eat the husk and just pretend it's full of nutrients and isn't really useless. But the jaws of our ability to yield accountability are absolutely toothless. So don't you kid yourself that any lips are being loosened. They won't ever tell us where the bodies are or show us where the proof is. It's on you to recognize the lechery our president so regularly oozes. It's on you to muster up some honesty and ask yourself how Biden won your trust, but it's America that loses. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises.
They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just
Welcome everyone to the Politics of Survival. I'm your host, Tara Reade, and wow, okay. So much going on in the world, right? We're watching a crypto company, FTX, explode and go bankrupt, and with it taking $2 billion of its customers' money. And that's been in the news. And also the fact that the CEO had given exclusively to Democrats something at 47 million or more. And that's all being exposed, and possibly a money laundering scheme that involved Ukrainian officials, a Biden official, and the CEO, who is now under house arrest and being investigated. So again, all the corruption we were talking about and money laundering we were talking about in Ukraine is coming to light. It's bubbling up. I encourage you to go to spaces and look for some of the crypto spaces. There's some really good ones to explain it. And whistleblowers are coming forward about some of the malfeasance that's going on. And so whistleblowers is actually the theme of our show, and I have with me someone really special. And before I introduce her, I wanted to talk a little bit about Rose McGowan. Rose McGowan, I'm going to get emotional. I don't think I could have survived the first year I came forward without her constant support and friendship and kindness, and educating me actually what was happening to me, because I was so targeted. And she is a very important person to me. And I saw that this documentary was coming out where she was in it, and I contacted the director right away because I have such a love for Rose and much of her work, because Rose is such a creative soul. She's more than an actress. She's a composer, she's a writer, she's a creative being. And you can read her book, Brave, which, Reef, if you don't mind bringing it up on the screen. And she also composed an album called Planet Nine. And Planet Nine has theta beats, and I've listened to it with earphones on. And if you have any kind of trauma or just you need to relax and study, it's a great album. You put it on and it really relaxes you, and it's amazing and it's beautiful. And she created it. So I was really pleased to see this new documentary that's coming out that's also nominated for an award. And I'm going to talk more about that with our guest. It's called When We Speak, and it follows the whistleblowing of 3 prominent women who spoke out about injustice and things that were going on. And I am so honored to have the director on today's show, Tasneem Brooker. So welcome, Taz.
Hi,
Welcome.
Tara. Thank you so
Hi.
much. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, Taz,
That
you are
amazing
amazing because you said this was your first full-length documentary. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So it was the first documentary that I directed, and I was looking for a long time for the right subject to make a documentary about.
Well, I'm wondering if we could do this. Could you set it up about what it's about, and then we'll show the audience briefly the trailer, and then the audience can, and then we'll tell them ways that they can watch it. So
Yeah,
could you kind of just tell a little bit about it? And
yeah, so it's about mainly three whistleblowers, female whistleblowers, who are Rose McGowan, talking about Weinstein.
Yes.
Katharine Gun, who was played by Keira Knightley in the Hollywood film Official Secrets, and who blew the whistle on the Iraq War. And Helen Evans, who was working for a UK charity called Oxfam. And she went over to Haiti after the 2010 earthquake and blew the whistle on the aid workers who were abusing earthquake survivors or coercing them into sex for food. So these are incredible women that spoke out on a global scale. These are global scandals, and I was really lucky to get them to tell me their story from beginning to end, what happened from when they first saw the wrongdoing to speaking up, and then what happened after they spoke up. So the documentary explores what happens to women, to people really, when they speak up against the system and against injustice. So that's what the film's about.
Well, Taz, it's a beautiful film. I mean, I'm not just saying that, but it was also nominated for an award. Could you talk about the award that it was nominated?
So it was nominated for Best Documentary at the Raindance Film Festival, which was a few weeks ago, and it was longlisted for the British Independent Film Awards as well. So I'm very, very happy because I wasn't expecting that kind of recognition for my first film, but I think a lot of it really goes to the women that are in the film, to Rose, Helen, and Katharine, who really, as a society, we owe them a lot for seeking the truth and for getting that out there. And I really wanted to show how much they went through and what they sacrificed for us as human beings to move forward, and to be more acknowledgement of what's going on really in the world and behind the curtain. And I just think they're just amazing women, and them and any whistleblower deserves their credit.
Well, let's let our audience catch a little preview of it. I'm going to have the trailer. Reef, if you could bring up the trailer. And Reef is from Indie News Network. I'm really appreciative to Indie News Network who's platforming my film and volunteering their time to help me engineer and because I can't do the tech stuff. So yeah. So without further ado, could you bring the film?
I wanted truth to be out there.
A terrible abuse of power is what lies at the heart of the Weinstein story.
People don't whistleblow through choice.
Suddenly you have to choose where your loyalties lie.
Without people who've got the courage to stand up and say, this is wrong, wrongs would not be put right.
And when they actually challenge power with their voices, they are routinely punished.
I was immediately taken to the police station, put in a cell. I thought, I'm in deep trouble.
They're going to get really, really hurt, and it's going to have devastating effects in their lives.
My house is bugged. I knew I was being hacked. I knew I was being surveilled.
It meant the loss of my career, leaving my home.
A lot of my family doesn't really speak to me.
There you have it, audience. That's When We Speak. So Taz, I know a bunch of people are going to ask the question, how can they watch it? And where can they find it?
So it should be now, it should be on iTunes and Amazon Prime. So they should be able to, in the US, they should watch it, and in the UK on those. And then I think in a month or so, it will be on Stars as well.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So yeah, hopefully more people will be able to get to see it. But really, I want people to watch it. Not for me. I don't have an ego about these things. It's about those three women, and unfortunately at the time when each one of them spoke out, they went through awful backlash by their industry, by their community, and a lot of them had to leave home. A lot of them suffered a huge amount of abuse, be that on social media or in the public, and the trauma that they all suffered for speaking out is completely unnecessary. And I wanted my film really to show the public and everyone else how we should treat whistleblowers better, and how there should be just so much more respect for the bravery of speaking out as you did as well. It takes a lot, and we should respect that someone's trying to get the truth out there to the rest of the public. And unfortunately, there's a backlash, and I wanted to shine the light really on that backlash. What happens after someone speaks up, and that as a society is what we need to sort out, is how we treat people that speak up. I think now you and Rose have incredibly strong following, and I think people are very, very grateful for what you've both done, and for speaking up and bringing truth to the surface of what these people really are, and who these people really are, and what they've done, and the bad things that these people have done. And ultimately, that's what whistleblowers are. They're calling out bad people, and they're getting good people are calling out bad people, and for some reason we're targeting the good people, and I just wanted that to stop. And if I can do that in a very small way of making a documentary that hopefully has the public and the audience empathizing a lot more with these brave, strong whistleblowers, then I've done my job. So that's the main reason for doing this film.
Well, again, I admire that you were able to get it funded, get it through, be able to lift their voices as you have, and then, to go on to get nominated for an award, which it deserves. After watching it, it was very riveting. And I'm sure as more and more people watch it in the United States, it will galvanize more of an audience. Yeah. And we both know, for instance, how whistleblowers are treated, like Julian Assange, for instance, right?
Yes, yes.
Is in Belmarsh prison, and now facing 175 years in U.S. prison for, for the Espionage Act, even though he's an Australian citizen, simply because he was a publisher and a journalist, and he did his job. And much of his journalism was then recycled through the New York Times and Washington Post as valid, and they knew it was valid. So it's not even saying he was invalid. So when you see whistleblowers,
sorry, I just wanted to interject only on the one thing, because I thought you might find this quite interesting. We didn't get it funded by a traditional route, so we took the idea, even when we had Rose, who was in the middle. The Weinstein case we were at the middle when I first got her. He hadn't even gone to trial yet. And so the Me Too movement was really kicking off. And I took this to every channel, and I said, we've got the Oxfam whistleblower, the Iraq War whistleblower, and Rose McGowan. And every single channel said no. No one wanted to fund it. So really early on, we were being shut down. No one and was like, I think I'm just trying to think of a way to say no to you. That's what one person at a major channel in the UK said. And I just thought, you're kidding me, right? So we ended up having to self-fund it because for me, it was just more important to get by this time I'd already filmed most of the women's interviews, and I just wanted, I felt like I absolutely owed it to them because they'd put their heart and soul into talking to me, and I couldn't not see it through by getting this film made and out. So we just decided to put some money into it and get it finished and get it out over the line. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to make that, you know, I think it's a really important
that's really
point.
important. That I'm sure that people want to know about grassroots funding, and that's very, I mean, that's from, I mean, you had to directly fund your work, your creative work. That must have been challenging, to say the least.
Yeah.
But you did it, and with such integrity. I think that's great. As far as, you know, as whistleblowers, oftentimes they sometimes get taken advantage of and people make money from them. And I know Rose McGowan is a good example of how, like, for instance, New York Times got a Pulitzer off of her, right? Off the reporting about her, and used her as clickbait. How many papers did they sell using her name, and other, you know, and that happened to me. Of course, they did hit pieces on me. How many times did they use me as clickbait and make a bunch of money? Whereas I was destitute, lost my housing, I lost everything coming forward. So when you showed a lot of integrity by just pulling together the funding and put together this film. Two questions for you. First of all, why do you think there was such resistance for funding it from an outside source? First question. Second question is, you know, how economically your whistleblowers, how were they faring after they came forward, you know, and what did you see?
So I had a lot of, I couldn't figure out, you know, I couldn't figure out why no one wanted to fund it. I just, for me, it was commercial enough. We had, it was a hot topic. We were the right company to make it. I just couldn't figure out why they said no one wanted to touch it. And I still don't know. I've got maybe one or two suspicions. Like, there's some voices that broadcasters never really want to be heard, you know, and channels, networks, they're owned by private companies and bigger companies that have bigger influences. And it seemed to be really, there was a major channel in the UK that I'd spoken to the first line of commissioning, and the guy was like, I love this. This is absolutely brilliant. I definitely want this. And I was like, amazing. This is great. This is going to be great for the film. And then he took it to the board, and someone on the board clearly had a problem with someone in the film, because he just kept on getting knocked back. It was a no, a no, a no. It was never a clear answer as to why it was a no, but it went from, and this happened twice, two major channels. It went from we're going to love this, oh, we've taken it higher up, and they've said no. So yeah, we just couldn't figure out why. The women, there was no remuneration for anyone, really. I pretty much did it for free. The women in the film did it for charity, donated any of their money to charity, and that's money that we might see from sales because it's really minimal. So yeah, there was everyone that did it, everyone, like my cameraman to the animator, everyone did it for the cause. Wow. Really, they really felt passionate about, in particular, the abuse stories that Helen and Rose were discussing. And I think that just mattered a lot to the crew, who were just so generous and kind with their time. You know, I don't know if we'll ever make our money back, but it kind of doesn't matter, because I'm more bothered about people seeing it and people treating whistleblowers differently. I just think there wasn't that film out there, and now there is, and I'm glad for it. And people like Rose is such an incredible human being. Rose and Helen and Katharine, undoubtedly they're incredible women. They're incredible people that spoke up. And Rose in particular has just suffered a lot. And as you said, how much she's helped you, how much she's helped so many people, the amount of people that I've seen her support and on Twitter and call people out, and actually people, you can see members of the public hugely appreciate that truth being told. But I think, unfortunately, it gets to her. She can be a target unnecessarily and unfortunately. And I think actually she should be on a pedestal, because she is a great human being. And there's been a lot of media, the Weinstein media in particular, were very good at portraying her as something that she wasn't. And when you meet her, as when you see how much support and how lovely and generous she is, and how supportive she's been to not only other actresses in Hollywood, but as you said, anyone that's spoken up, then you really get to see what a genuine person she is. And I was speaking to a friend the other day about her, and I just said, look, she just has the truth in her. She desperately wants that out. And I feel like saying to Rose, like, all right, you're done now. Just look after yourself and just go and have a nice life and look after yourself, because you've helped everyone. I don't know what more you can do. And like you lifted the lid on a huge subject, and that to open a Pandora's box takes its toll personally. But the world, will one day thank you for it properly. But what you're going to have to go through between now and then is a lot, and you shouldn't have to.
Right, we shouldn't have to. It should be easier for whistleblowers. Now, that brings me to that question about their personal. Each woman paid a personal price, be it their marriage, their housing, like for me, it was everything. I lost everything coming forward. I mean, literally, and I'm still trying to gain my footing. And the monster that hurt me is one of the most powerful people on earth. So it's not over for me. And he's still not been investigated. He might be. And I said I would testify under oath, and I hope he is investigated. But that may as it may, with these women that came forward about such particular strong issues that really Western media tries to cover up and suppress. Did you find that there's almost a gender bias against female whistleblowers, or is it just whistleblowers in general? I mean, what is there a gauge? Maybe I shouldn't put that weight on it, but what is your thought about all of that? In other words, did you see the channels kind of rejecting it because it was about, some of the content was about sexual assault, abuse of that nature?
Yeah, I think they, in particular, Helen, everyone was used to Weinstein by the time we were making the film, and they knew the Weinstein story. And it was just became such a huge global movement. Right. Me too. But with Helen, it was very different. I think, I wonder where we got a lot of rejection from, the fact that she was calling out the aid sector and charities.
The nonprofit sector,
and she just said, look, she kept on saying, I'd be surprised if anyone funds this, because you're basically saying that there's people out there who go to war-torn countries or countries that have had an earthquake, and you totally rely on these aid workers to do good. And some of them don't, they just don't. And it's the worst thing in the world to hear what they are doing. And they're in this position where they can give people that are desperate food, and they're exchanging that for sex. And that is a very, very hard pill to swallow, and to get that story out. And people were spitting at Helen in the street when she exposed this. So she had, she had to leave Oxford, which was where she was living, and everyone from Oxfam headquarters was living. It was, it was a bad situation, and everyone felt that because she spoke up, she was taking money away away from the aid sector. So I think there are a few subjects that are very, the aid sector being one, is can put people off completely in terms of funding and in terms of not wanting to really engage. So I just don't, do you know what, that's so awful, I just don't want to engage in it. And you're saying something about charities, and it's like, yeah, but we're saying something about what's going wrong in charities, and if no one ever speaks up about it, it'll never get fixed. And ultimately, you know, she scratched the surface and she exposed huge miscarriages of justice that was going on within those organizations. And it wasn't just Oxfam, these things were happening across all aid sectors, all charities that were out in the field abusing their position. And since she's spoken, it's changed and legislation has been brought in. So it was really important for her to speak up. But yeah, a lot of the time people just didn't want to hear because of that, in particular those subjects, I think.
Interesting. You know, and of course the UN has been exposed to taking advantage of vulnerable populations. So yeah, much more than Oxfam. And you know, Eliza Blue in our space, she's she brings awareness about human sexual trafficking worldwide, and she had talked about the UN and also the FBI. They have not been, you know, they've now discovered their abuses, and there's been no justice yet in that space either. So I think when there's people in power over vulnerable populations, unfortunately, there are predators sometimes in that, you know, right?
I think that was what was coming up. Yeah. I think that was what was coming up a lot. It was that the people were hiring each other and friends, and that and going from country to country. And the UN came up a lot. Yeah, when I was speaking to Helen, I had quite a few whistleblowers mention the UN, and do I want to cover that as well? But I think we had enough with Helen's story.
Right. Yeah, and you kind of kept the focus there.
Yes.
Now, are you having since the film has come out, are you having other whistleblowers reach out to you for support, or just, you know, saying how much they like the film, or just actually for help and that kind of thing? Are you having that happen?
Yeah. So we had, so I made the film with a whistleblowing charity called Protect, who are based in the UK, and they are an incredible charity. So you can call them if you're thinking about whistleblowing or seen wrongdoing in your workplace, and they will give you legal advice. It's all free. They'll tell you how to maneuver your way through the situation. And a lot of major whistleblowers have gone through Protect. And so I worked very closely with them. So two of the people, Bob and Necker, who are in the film, who comment on the typical journey of a whistleblower, they work for Protect. And we had for my screening at Rain Dance that was very much in conjunction with Protect. And so there was a lot of whistleblowers at my screening, which was incredible. And it meant so much that they watched the documentary and that they felt something for it. The atmosphere in the room was electric in the screening, because it was just so, people really, apparently they were whooping, or you know, when Rose was saying a few things about Weinstein and about and with Helen, and that's good to know, that to get their acceptance, that I did a film that felt right for them, that resonated with them. And so after the screening, I had a lot of whistleblowers come up to me, but also contact me and say, you know, can you connect me with this person, and would Helen like to come and speak? And you know, everyone wanted to know about Rose, and yeah, there was a lot of people reaching out, and a lot of the time I say, look, just go to Protect. They're such a good charity in the UK. But yes, I had quite a few people saying, I'm going through. We actually had people in the screening. We did a Q&A after the screening, and there were 2 or 3 whistleblowers who spoke out there and then, telling us their experiencing. It was like people were just pouring their heart out at the screening. it was very moving, and you know, they're just incredible people.
Yeah. And for survivors, you know, of sexual assault coming out about powerful people, you know, and you had 2 of those women in your film. One of the challenges is you get approached sometimes by other people that don't have the best intentions. So it's really, you find yourself kind of almost defensive or protective because, you know, there's a lot of trickery, unfortunately, you know, and that kind of thing. So I think that the fact that you worked with Protect in tandem was really positive. And we don't have something equivalent like that in the United States. Time's Up was actually revealed, and it's been dismantled as a catch and kill for powerful men. And they were actually, you know, and not just my case, but in the Cuomo survivors' cases, they got exposed for actually colluding with the monster, so to speak.
Yes, I heard
Yeah,
this,
and in my case too. And in fact, I think it was Cuomo's upper staff and the Time's Up were talking on text, and it got revealed in the criminal hearing that they were saying, well, we can now victim shame on the record because of Tara Reade's case with Joe Biden.
I mean,
isn't that amazing? These are people and the top of power, right, that are doing that. And my whole goal when I came forward was to inform my fellow citizens, but also to help other survivors. And I speak to Lindsay Boylan, who's one of the Cuomo survivors, and we've talked about this, about the treachery and the corruption. And I'm glad that in the UK there's somewhere to go, because there is literally nowhere safe to go in the United States right now.
And how do you ever, for something like that to happen, how do you ever trust anyone? How can you ever trust anything that when something like Time's Out, even that turns its back on you?
More than turn their back. I mean, they actually took the information, right, and tricked me. 3 people were on Joe Biden's payroll when I came to them for help, and they didn't tell me. They were already working for him, getting money from him.
I mean, there needs to be,
it's despicable.
It is, it absolutely is. And there needs to be more protection for whistleblowers, but more support. Like there's a moment in the film where Katharine Gun is talking about having told the story so many times. You know, she was in the cinema, she's watched Keira Knightley play her over and over and over again. She did this tour of the world, and she can relay this story of what happened to her. And yet no one ever asked her if she was okay and if it really affected her afterwards, what happened afterwards, you know. So her case got kicked out of court because, you know, she's going up against the UK government. So they don't really want her to expose what the goings on behind the curtain. Yeah. So she, you know, they dragged her soul all the way through the mud just so they could break her to get her into the courtrooms, just to immediately say, by the way, we're throwing this out. And so she's relieved, but then disappointed. And no one, and that for the film, the Hollywood film ends there, but her life carries on, and we speak to her about what happens after that. And she, as you'll see in the film, she's hugely affected because she was so used to talking about the story up to a point, her experience. And then when you talk to her afterwards, she just says, I didn't have this support. I didn't have this. I didn't know who I could talk to about what happened afterwards and about the aftermath and how I was treated. Because I think when you're going through that, and I don't know from what I've seen in the whistleblowers I've spoken to, when you're going through exposing the truth and whistleblowing, you probably get a heightened sense of adrenaline and stress and trauma, but you're going through this trauma. And then afterwards, if you don't talk to anyone about that, it's going to start eating you up. And what was very, very common in my film, and that we talk about a lot, is a level of PTSD and mental health issues and anxiety. And that is born a lot from, as well, not being able to trust people. And how can you, when all of your safety and security around you that you thought was trustworthy lets you down like that? And that just does so much to you as a human being, that you need support. And it is great that in the UK we've got Protect, they understand levels of bureaucracy as well, but they're there to support as well. I know that Katharine started to meet up with a lot of whistleblowers on a global level and go to conferences just to talk to other people that had gone through a similar experience to her. And I think it massively helped. I think it helped a lot.
Good. Did you know, it's interesting. I was going to ask you if the British media continued to drag her, or if it was just silence then after that, because she didn't really get to say her piece in court, which was why, right? Publicly. I mean, the film came out, Official Secrets, but before that, I was just thinking, did she write an op-ed, or did she get to express that in any way at that time, why she did what she did? Because it was just sort of left there.
I think it was just left there. It's like, I think they took a long time to make the film. I think that took about 10 years to try and get the film made.
10 years?
Yeah, because it was dropping in and out of interest and going around the houses and stuff. So I think she ultimately, it'd been forgotten about. It got dropped. It was like, okay, I think there was this, email that said about coercing swing nations to invade Iraq illegally, and it's like, actually, that's a massive deal. But it's the same, people talk about weapons of mass destruction, and we can all talk about that now, 20 years on, 10, 20 years on, anything like that, people now say, okay, it's a bit more, I can now talk about it a bit more freely than almost when it was going on. I think it was like it exposed, it came out, and then it dropped off the face of the earth.
And isn't it interesting how history is repeating itself? Because now we have Ukraine, the proxy war that the US and NATO is fighting against Russia via Ukraine. And in the UK, they banned RT, so that other voice. And now they're pushing for not only weapons, they're pushing for nuclear war. Like the US and NATO are pushing us towards nuclear war, not diplomacy, more and more weapons. $50 billion right now is on the table in the US in January, $50 billion more to go to. Meanwhile, our country's, kind of falling apart economically.
Yeah.
And we're being censored heavily. And it's the same subject matter that Katharine Gun was talking about. They're publicly talking about strong arming other nations that don't go along with them. They must rebuff Russia or they will get sanctioned. So they're not even hiding it anymore. Like it's not even like, you know what I mean? So it's interesting how it's like amnesia. So I really think the Official Secrets, I think your documentary raises awareness again to say, hey, wait a second. We went through this with Iraq and 1 million+ people died for an illegal war. And now we're doing it again. And so I think it's a very
But I just think they don't care if they've got blood on their hands, and war means money, doesn't it? It's only ever going to benefit the rich people and the men in power. It makes the Iraq war made an incredible amount of money for the West. All the oil pipelines that the West took over in Iraq, and that's what it was about. Everyone knew that was what it was about. But unfortunately, no one, the leaders of our country don't care about soldiers. They don't care about the families of soldiers that have to go out and fight in a war that isn't anything to do with them and defend them. And it's just about money. It's about, land and property and guns, trade.
And we're doing it again to Haiti, like we're going in and or invading Haiti. The US is. I don't think the English is involved with that right now, but the US is. And so interesting that Oxfam came up in your documentary, but all three subject matter is so meaningful right in this moment in history.
It's funny, isn't it? Because these were like big scandals in the last 20 years. So it did feel a little bit, I mean, Rose was the most recent. And even then, it feels like, we're a year on from when he got sentenced. And even then, it feels a little bit further away, and actually doesn't take long for us to come full circle again. And you're right, there's this horrible amnesia where it's like, God, are we really going to make this mistake again? Just really hope not. I really hope that's not the case. I do think now, though, with your voice, with voices like Rose, there's so much more movement on Twitter, on Instagram, on social media of the public just saying, no, this isn't right. This doesn't feel right. Something feels wrong about this, and calling out the governments, calling out the bureaucracy and the bullshit. I think it absolutely, people are moving a lot more. People's voices are getting stronger, and they're stronger than they were 20 years ago. And hopefully we won't go to such extremes without there being some kind of uprising against war, against corruption.
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, you were at the brink again, so we'll see. I did have a question about your process, though, because you're not just the director. You were also, I guess, the executive producer, the producer.
Yeah.
In that sense, I mean, you had to kind of fill a lot of roles. But could you talk a little bit about the impact these stories had on you and how you felt, and what kind of made you galvanized in that sense to pick these particular stories?
Yeah, it's not easy, to hear. There's a lot more that we heard about, that I heard about, obviously off camera than on camera, than we actually filmed. And I'm not going to lie and say that it didn't affect me in any way, especially in particular stories that Helen came out with, that stories that Helen told me about when she was out in the field, things that she saw. And so it's particularly hard to hear those stories and know what to include and what not to include, but it does stay with you mentally. And sometimes I wish I'd never heard some of these things. And Rose has got a million truths to tell, and they're all shocking. And sometimes, I mean, it's something the other week, and I just thought, oh my God, I can't get that out of my head. And I just hope, I don't really, you want to know, but then you don't want it to know, because you think, what can I do with this information?
Well, that's secondary trauma, right?
Yeah.
So how do you, as a creative person, because you're sensitive and you're compassionate, how do you integrate that into your work rather than kind of internalize it?
So I think for me, it was about channeling what they had and getting it out on screen to really, so there was some kind of justice for what they went through. I felt that ultimately that whole stream of it coming from them to me and then going on screen and then going out to the audience and people watching it, I almost feel like there's that, okay, everyone knows it's a shared problem. Everyone knows this. And what can we do about it? What do we do as human beings, as well as help each other? Hopefully it makes us stronger to speak up and speak out as well. I tried to end the film on a little bit of a high, that to not really say you're going to go through the mill and it's going to be awful if you speak up. It was hard to not say that for the three women that are in the film. Because obviously they did go through hell, but I then put in archive from mass movements and people that were marching against mass surveillance and anything that they, women's rights issues. So it was to say, look, now we can galvanize as human beings. We can go to the streets, we can march, we can protest, and we can get our voices heard. So it's not just this one voice that's shouting into the darkness, telling us that the atrocities that they've seen, we should be on their side, and we should all be marching and all be supporting each other against corruption. And so that's how I kind of, in my sense, getting it out on film and getting other people to watch was quite cathartic for me as well.
Well, good. Yeah. And I know what you're saying about that balance, because one of the things about me coming forward about Biden is there are other women who have not come forward because of watching what happened to me and watching what happened to Cuomo survivors, and Rose as well. And seeing people in that space just having their lives eviscerated, destroyed, like a cannonball taken to them. So why would you want to put yourself through that And my answer to that is this: yes, I lost everything physical. Like I lost my housing, money, job, my reputation, things that are, you know what I mean, you know, because of the way I was damaged in the press. But I gained my freedom, and my soul is free. And they can't take away who I am. And keeping that secret for a powerful man and kind of protecting this powerful institution rather than lifting my voice was suffocating me. It was killing me. So I think that yes, you may lose everything. You may even lose your freedom. I was threatened with prison, right? But it's worth it in the end to speak your truth. It really is. And so that's kind of my message. That's how I got through it. And I think other whistleblowers have varying degrees of that same message. It gives you freedom.
Absolutely. It's exactly what all three of them say in the film, is that they had tunnel vision. Like they just had to get the truth out there. They couldn't sleep when they were trying to tell people weren't listening. And this, you know, Helen went to the charities, she went to her bosses, she went to the charities commission, she tried to speak up, and no one was listening, no one was doing anything about it. And each of them, what resonated with any whistleblower is that they cannot, there's such a strong moral compass, such a strong sense of good, that they can't sleep. All of them, everyone, and even the ones that I interviewed for research purposes, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, couldn't function until they got that truth out of their system. And once they did, they felt like a weight had been lifted. And it's like, you know, I've done it now, I've done it, and I've done the right thing. And ultimately, those women, and which is what we show, and whistleblowers will go down in history as always doing the right thing. They'll have always done the right thing. We're not going to look back on whistleblowers and go, wish they didn't speak up, wish they didn't tell us the truth about that. We're not going to do that. You know, we're going to say, shit, I'm so glad they did. I'm so glad they did, because now we know. And I think with you and with Rose in particular, he's a man of power, and you've spoken, and it's made people look, and it's made people look twice and say something's not right there. And I think that's what, no matter how hard it is, I think ultimately you've made people look twice, and that's what matters. And, you know, hats off for you for speaking up. It can't have been easy. And hopefully there's some kind of, you've seen a little bit of that in the film, to know that you weren't alone. Other whistleblowers have gone through this in different varying scales.
And restorative justice just isn't always there for us. And that's just true.
No.
We're not always going to see the monsters locked up. Sometimes they're going to hold powerful positions, and we have to live with it. And you have to learn to find a way to turn your rage into outrage and help people rather than. But kudos to you and for giving people a vehicle to tell their story and a platform, you know, to getting it out there, because those are hard to find, you know. And I would just say that, you know, what I noticed about the documentary that I really liked, and it's something that I say about my own history with what happened to me, I want to define that experience. I don't want other people to define it for me.
Yes.
I define that experience. It does not define me. And that's why your film moved me so much, because each of their stories, they were creating, you know, they were expressing their own truth.
Yeah, when I wanted to make the film, I was like, look, I've probably only got one chance to get their interview very candidly in one go. And when Helen initially, you know, there's a lot of distrust towards anyone from TV or film, or you know, so to get that, I got introduced. I originally went to Protect, who introduced me to Helen, you know, and I could see that I had good intentions to really show what whistleblowers go through in a pure sense, and not sensationalize it. And so they connected with me with Helen, and Helen just said, I'm not going to, I'm happy to talk to you on the phone, I'm not going to come on your film. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, you know, okay, I get that, I get it. And as long as you can talk to me and you're happy to talk to me about your research, that's fine. And we chatted and we spoke more and more. And then out of the blue, she just said, okay, I'm ready to do this. I'll do it. I'll do it on camera. I'll just do it once and that's it. And I wasn't ready. And I was like, quick. I quickly got my camera and we booked a studio and it was all very dark. And I just focused on her and her story and just let her speak from beginning to end. And with all three, we basically said, just tell us your story, tell us what you want to say, and how you want to tell it. And all I'll do is I'll cut in between those stories. And the hardest bit was editing it, because they're such three different stories, but really they all are the same, in they all had the same experience. They've all come from completely different walks of life, completely different parts of the world, very different upbringings, all of them, all three of them. And yet I had to almost put a timeline of all three stories. Me and my editor worked round the clock. My editor was amazing, and we worked round the clock, and we just had to get these points of like, where were the really high points. And it was like when they first saw the wrongdoing, when they went to the press, and then the aftermath. And we had to line all three stories up together, and that was hard. But then when you laid it down like that, this is a shared experience, and hopefully that comes across in the film, and you see what they go through. But yeah, it wasn't easy to gain the trust at first, because understandably whistleblowers are quite closed people.
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, yeah, it's because you get your trust,
but rightly so. Rightly
Yeah.
so. I think you do need to be cautious. If you've been stung, you're not going to put your hand out there again, you know. If it's gonna get bitten, you know, it's one of those things. And very much so dealing with the PTSD. That PTSD is often referred to in war, and soldiers that have been out in war. And it's interesting that PTSD is a common side effect of whistleblowers, and that level of trauma is very interesting. That comes up a lot.
Yeah, I think it's the PTSD that comes up too is you deal with it too when you're silenced, and when you're I don't know, I'm trying to think of the right word, but you know, when you're marginalized or silenced, and your truth just isn't heard at all. And then when it gets heard, then it's twisted and used against you, right? And you know, we've all three whistleblowers dealt with that, and they kind of talked about that. But I think you know, you did a good job of, as a filmmaker, of that empathetic, compassionate space. Trauma informed, actually, is what I would call it. You were very trauma informed the way you approached the filmmaking, which doesn't always happen.
No, I knew that I knew I had to get advice from psychologists before I did. And there was a huge duty of care to the women that participated in the film. And there were so many things that's like, look, we're going to talk about this. I sent questions in advance. I said, happy to not discuss anything that you don't want to talk about. We'll have breaks whenever you want, and just make it as comfortable of a filming experience as possible. But you know, as you've seen in the film, there were some very surprising moments where the women broke down, you know, just talking about it. And it's not easy, and it was hard to film that, and it was hard to know when, you know, we stopped filming and said, you know, do you want to carry on? Do you want to carry on talking about this? And as soon as it's a no, it's like, fine, let's move on, change, or do you want to take a break? And there was a big duty of care. And afterwards, you know, I stayed in touch with all three of them a lot, making sure they were all right. I let them know they've all saw the film before it came out, and I kept them updated with any press and with anything. So I hope they all know that they can trust me still, because I just, I think they do, because obviously I'm still in touch with them. Yeah, and very much so. I'd say that, we've had this shared experience of the film, but I think they know how much they could trust me to make the film. Yeah.
And grief like that from trauma it's just not linear. The healing's not linear. We want it to be as human beings. We want to be like, okay, beginning and middle and, like, okay, like almost like a film, right? Like you want the beginning and then the middle and the end, but it's not like that. And with grief. And so when you retell your story or your history of whatever happened, it it can have a different points of that experience will suddenly bubble up. I remember when I told my experience, I remembered certain things by my second interview that I had really suppressed because it had been years. And so I just didn't talk about it. And so it was very suppressed. And then I started having bad dreams again. And so, survivors often go through that. It can trigger your bad dreams. It can trigger the visceral experience if it's been abuse, right? That kind of trauma. If you're observing trauma, the secondary trauma, it can bring back that, horrible, experience as well.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying. And as a filmmaker, I really appreciated that you did it in such a trauma-informed way. You could see that you really honored each person and gave them a lot of space. I wanted to, Reef, if we could, do we have any questions or comments for Taz that we could bring up?
Yeah, I got a couple.
Okay.
First one is, was this your first documentary or film, and have you always wanted to do work on this topic? And there's one more after that.
Okay. Well, Taz.
Yeah. So yes, it was my first documentary that I made. The first film I ever made, first film that I directed, and I was looking for a subject. So looking for probably about a year to try and find something that would be worthy of my first documentary. And I saw an article about a whistleblower in New York whose community had turned on him. And he was whistleblowing about abuse in the community. And I was really shocked, really, really shocked that someone that was speaking out about abuse would have his community attack him. And I couldn't believe that that's what happened to whistleblowers. So I basically, after that, I that's when I started researching whistleblowers and their timeline and the aftermath, and I was fascinated what I came up with. And then I just thought, I've got to make a film about this. I need to shine a light on the aftermath and how people need to treat whistleblowers better. So I always think the best documentary is the one you learn something from, you didn't know anything about, and hopefully that's what people get from this. But yeah, that was how I came to this subject.
Okay, what was the second question that you had for her?
The second question was, as a citizen of the UK, how do you feel about the man who doesn't sweat, Prince Andrew, and his accusations? If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't believe he doesn't sweat, for starters. I just think anyone that gets paid off, I just don't believe it. I just don't believe that he had nothing to do with this. I think the whole Epstein saga is a shameful piece of history that still needs to be exposed. There's a lot of people on that list that went to that island. I don't believe that they're innocent. I just don't believe it. And what happened to Epstein, just the fact that Prince Andrew got off, he paid anyone that pays their subjects, anyone that pays their accusers off. What does that tell you? So yeah, as a British citizen, it's another shameful mark against the UK.
Well, the royal family, it's not really against Ukraine, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah, in the sense that we've not them. Yeah, we've not done anything about it. I mean, why could he not have gone to court about this? He's protected by incredibly powerful people, and so he's never gonna stand trial. what does that
Right.
say to you? I mean, that in itself, and again, there's a great amnesia around that.
Mhm.
You know, that's forgotten about. Well, it wasn't. You know, it came up again recently, and then everyone was like, this guy is standing there at, you know, with the Queen, and it was just all very icky, and yet no one can say anything. But yeah, I mean, where I stand with that is that there's just too many things pointing to the fact that he.
And there was a huge connection between the U.S., the Clinton administration, covering up
Yes.
Bill Clinton's involvement, plus David Boies, who is an evil actor, in my opinion. He's a lawyer that actually, he was part of the machinery that helped Weinstein, you know, right?
Yeah.
He was awful. And then he ended up representing the victims in Epstein. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, well, we're never going to get that client list. Like this is all, you know, a theater.
Yeah. And the fact that they got paid off very, very quickly. The moment, I mean, it was interesting because it was almost like they waited for the public to think this might go to trial, even though they knew months before there was no chance of it ever going to trial. There was no, people were going to get paid off, and this is never ever going to be exposed to that level. Everyone saw who went to that island, that list of people. Nothing has been done. Nothing's been done. And it's just, God knows, you know, to scratch the surface on that, to really, really know what's going on. I think we only really know a superficial level of what actually was going on there. But yeah, it's not good.
Well, okay, I want to ask you this as our the closing question. What are your plans now? Now you've got this wonderful documentary, you're getting it out, and could you repeat just one more time for our audience? They can find it on
so you can watch When We Speak on Amazon Prime and iTunes, and it will be coming on Stars in the US. Yeah.
Okay, so what's next for you as a filmmaker? Because I know you're going to be, are you actively working on a new project, or are you basically just focusing on the distribution of this one?
So we're looking at a distribution of this one, and we're waiting to hear back about another one or two more projects that I halfway through, but haven't got the funding for yet. But I think since the popularity of When We Speak is now finally getting what it deserves, hopefully we'll get some funding for the next film. But yeah, there are a few things in the pipeline.
Fabulous. Okay,
more documentaries, I think.
Oh, good, more documentaries. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And you like that genre? Are you thinking about any other genres, or are you going to stay in the documentary pretty much?
I would like to work more I would like to do drama. I would like to move into drama, but I think I would move into more docudrama and then fully into drama. So not do the complete leap, but slowly transition into the two. Yeah.
Tara, why did you freeze? Tara. I wonder why that happened. But anyway, I can close too if we need to. But yeah, I think that's been. There's Tara's phone. Let's see if I can.
Hello.
Hey. Yeah.
Hey. Got knocked off there. So are you there, Reef?
Yes,
you got me?
I'm here. I got you.
Okay, cool. So Taz, I just want to tell you, thank you so much for all your time and energy that you've put into this documentary. It's so meaningful. I mean, I want to watch it again, actually. It was beautifully done. Thank you. I want to say to the audience that's listening, I'm sorry. Do you lost me again? Okay. I don't know why I'm having some technical difficulties. So here, hold on. Here we go. Oh. Can you hear me now? Okay.
I'm going to try to come back in the room.
Yay, there's loads of me. Too many. Hey, Reade. Hey.
All right, are you getting me now? Okay. All right, so my we're having a windstorm here, so I got knocked out. So that's my internet. It's a pretty high wind, so that's what happened.
Stay safe.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's just blowing things around and blew off the signal. But I wanted to say, Taz, thank you so much, and it was so lovely to see you. And for our audience members, you can find Taz's film, her links, all underneath the links right here. They're embedded in the contacts. And please, Taz, could you tell people how they can contact you on social media as well?
Oh yeah, I've got a Twitter account, and it's you've connected me on your Twitter, so they can go, if they're following you, then they can get me on Twitter. That's
great.
Easily done. Yeah, I'm kind of I'm on Twitter more than I am on Instagram or anything, so
all right,
yeah, that's easier.
Well, thank you so much, Taz Brooker, and your film is amazing. I loved it, and we look forward to having you on again.
Thank you so much, Tara. I honestly thank you so much, and you know, hats off to you for everything you've done. I know you've gone. This film is as much about you speaking up as the three women in the film as well. So, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. So audience, we'll see you next time. This was The Politics of Survival. Check out the film When We Speak, and at the different links that we have below. The trailers there available too. And we'll see you next time. Take care.